I think it must have been as a trustee of ICS when the question of ICS being mandated to do the ESIA came up. It may have been before, but I think that is the first time when we were conscious that there was going to be a development on Assomption.
Would you know roughly when?
No. It would have been 2020, 2023. It would have been late 2023, perhaps, because I remember what happened in early 2024. So this must have predated that.
Would I be correct to say that would have been around May 2023?
Could well have been.
Yes. So at that time, Mr. Glennie Savvy was also a trustee or a member of ICS.
He was.
Of the board.
He was a trustee, yes, and he was the vice chair.
Of ICS at that time. Yes. So what was the reaction? It's very difficult now because there's ICS and there's SIF. Which one do you want to go with first?
I'm in your hands.
Which one was more surprised, ICS or SIF?
Well, no, SIF was later. So there was no surprise at that point because no details had been indicated. When the discussion happened at the Board of Trustees of ICS, at which I was present or not, as I will explain in a minute, the idea, there was only a vague notion that there would be a hotel development on Assumption and that ICS was going to vie for the position of doing the ESIA.
So would I be correct to say that at that juncture, ICS had never conducted an ESIA before?
I'm not privy to that.
Well, in your knowledge, I mean, well, you were a trustee.
I don't know. I don't know whether they had or not. I suspect that they hadn't.
When had you become a trustee of ICS?
Oh, a long time before, 2009.
Yes. So during all that time, if there had been any,
I would have known.
You would have known,
yes.
And you don't remember?
No, I don't remember, but that's not to say that certain trustees or certain employees of ICS had not themselves conducted ESIAs.
No, I'm talking about ICS itself.
I think that was the first.
Yeah, and I would be correct to say that it actually applied for a license to do that.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was the first one ever it had conducted.
That was the first one. There was a concurrent discussion of an ESIA on Grand Barbe at Silhouette. I don't know which came first, but that would have been amongst the first.
Yes. So the plan was for ICS to set itself up to do those two ESIAs, one for Grand Barbe and one for Assomption. Am I correct? Yes. So I suppose you learned first as a trustee of ICS, and then SIF was also informed, possibly around the same time, about the development.
Yes, I think we must have got to know about the same time of the development. Okay. And if we hadn't known, I would have brought my knowledge from the ICS board to the SIF board.
When was the full concept explained to both organizations?
I don't know that there was ever a full explanation, and if I may explain, there was a decision taken at some point by the ICS board that ICS would go ahead. And apply to do the ESIA. So that was a decision that was taken at board level. I've been reminded that I wasn't at that particular board level, but that's neither here nor there, because had I been, I would have voted in favor of ICS conducting the ESIA, both there and at Grand Barbe, for the principal reason that I felt that no other organization knew the islands as well as ICS did, and that therefore it was particularly well placed to be able to do an ESIA, despite an apparent conflict of interest with IDC, which sat on its board. I want to make that very clear. I was not there when the decision was made, but I would have supported it had I been.
Was there a reason why it had to be an organization to carry out the ESIA, and why it wasn't tendered out to other scientific organizations, local and international?
I doubt that. I doubt it. I don't know. I'm not privy to the decisions. I only sat on the board of ICS, so I was only privy to what was discussed at board level. But there wasn't any particular reason, so far as I know, as to why it had to be ICS and not any other organization, other than what I have just said, and that is my own view of the matter.
Apart from the fact that the vice chair of ICS was Mr. Glennie Savvy, who was at the forefront of the development, was there any other reason why ICS wanted to be involved in the ESIA?
Yes, there was a financial reason. There would have been a
Tell us about that.
ICS, at the best of times, runs on a shoestring. So this would have been maybe I overstate, but finance is always an issue at ICS, and this was going to be a good source of income.
Like how much?
I don't know. I was not
millions of dollars.
No, 100,000 maybe, or 150,000, something in that region.
Apart from that, were there other carrots that were dangled in terms of maybe a research station or stuff like that?
I don't know whether we can make the link, but whether or not ICS carried out the ESIA, ICS and IDC had an arrangement together with the government that ICS would run conservation on all the IDC islands. So ipso facto, ICS would have been mandated to carry out the conservation and biodiversity research on Assomption.
Okay. Very soon after that, I suppose, when the scoping exercise took place, you were then involved with another organization, the SIF, which weren't very happy with the way the assessment was being conducted and being put together. Would I be correct?
Absolutely, that was correct.
So did you perceive a conflict there, having one foot in the ICS camp and one foot on the SIF camp?
Yes, and that conflict ensured that my tenure on the ICS board was truncated, because there was, not necessarily at that point, but clearly SIF was not entirely satisfied with the SIA that ICS had conducted. We felt that there were gaps and that certain things could have been better done. But overall, it was a good ESIA exercise. But there were gaps, and some of the two of these gaps were the terrestrial fauna study and the marine study. Those two were gaps, as well as, and I remember specifically, the main issue was, well, what about the back of house? All of those people who are going to be working there, and what's going to happen to their sewerage and all that sort of stuff. That was not, in our view, had not been, in our SIF view, had not been properly.
Yeah, well, given all the time that you've been on those two organizations, when did the magnitude of development actually make you all kind of start wondering about its impact on both Assomption and Aldabra?
When, well, for me, I think for the management of SIF, it was earlier because they had been involved in the scoping. The board had not been involved in the scoping. I personally came to know of the magnitude when there was a public presentation of the project at the Roche-Caïman Community Center, which I attended along with Dr. Frauke and Dr. Annabelle, amongst others. That's when the scope of the thing hit me. I was not aware then. I became aware subsequently of the notice of interest which IDC had put out, asking for an expression of interest
on the 3rd of June 2024. On the 3rd of June 2024.
June 2024, and I subsequently said, and I stand by it, that there were two expressions of interest advertised at the same time. Assumption ended up with what should have been on
Kuwait TV,
and that was absolutely clear. But I didn't know it. I didn't know it at the time. I first became aware
Do you know
at
why?
that public meeting.
Do you know why?
I don't read The Nation, and it appeared there. I ought to have known. I was aware that, but I hadn't seen the.
Yeah, I know, but that was in June 24.
Yes.
Had you not bodily gone, rendered yourself to Assomption?
Oh no, yes, of course we had. Was
And
that
you-
in June 24 that there was?
Yeah, the expression of interest was on the 3rd of June
Okay,
2024.
no. Well, in that case, no.
23?
23, I think.
Yeah. Yes, sorry,
Yes.
excuse me.
The next thing
2023.
that happened was the public meeting
Mm.
at Roche Caïman, where I made the point that I thought that this was a much.
At that
much
stage,
good-
you'd already left ICS?
No.
You was-
I can't remember. I left ICS. No, I couldn't have done because I left ICS at the end of 2024.
Okay.
So I was still a member of ICS, and I raised the point. ICS was not present. Well, it was. Yes, Mr. Burke was there. IDC was there, along with the.
Yeah, Mr. Savvy was there. Mr. Savvy represented IDC, ICS at the meeting.
Yes, but I think Mr. Savvy. I can't speak for Mr. Savvy, but I can speak for many others who were wearing different hats. That we managed the conflict reasonably well. At least I can speak for myself that the conflict was very properly
In what
managed.
way?
Well, in the sense that we said things that needed to be said wearing one hat, and we said things that needed to be said wearing another hat.
But were you as vociferous for each side?
Yes, I think so.
So you said we would like to see development happening because it will sustain the outer islands.
Yes.
However, we are opposed to a development of that magnitude.
Absolutely, I'm on the record, and
No,
I,
no,
will
I
point-
know, that's why I'm saying it
Oh
to
yes.
you.
Oh yes, totally.
Okay?
So just to recap, at that meeting, that's when I became aware and alarmed at the size of the project. I asked a couple of questions. I made a couple of observations. One of them was that I didn't see that the development fitted Assumption in the design of the buildings and in the size of the buildings and in the stretch of the development. That's the point that I made then. And there the matter rested until in April of 2024, the SIF board went to Aldabra for its annual general meeting. And that's when we saw for ourselves, transiting through Assumption, what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
We had not been aware, or at least I had not been aware, that the runway had been extended. And when we landed, it was very obvious that extensive works had been carried out. And I was very concerned that one of the dunes had lost, well, half of one of the dunes had gone in order to backfill the runway. I subsequently learned that the depredation of the dunes had started at the building of the original runway, but that's neither here nor there. There's a lot of the dune missing, and of course the runway was extremely long, and we could see at that point that there were vehicles, foreign vehicles on the ground, and that it was obvious that this development was imminent. That's when we became
So
aware.
you would confirm what Mr. Espaon said. There were vehicles there with license numbers.
Oh, absolutely. We
completely.
photographed these.
Yeah.
Mr. Espaon may have alerted us before because he does a lot of cruising, and he may well have gone to Assumption before and alerted us. But that's when we all, including Mr. Espaon, together first had a knowledge of the development and of the scale and magnitude of the development.
So what happened?
Well, we came back. We came back from Assumption, and we made it known publicly through a press release.
Excuse me for a minute.
We made it known through a press release that we were concerned at the scale of this development, and that we felt
So
that is
who
threatened.
did you address these concerns to?
It was a press release. We sent it to the media houses, and if I'm not mistaken, because we did several of those, the CEO, Dr. Frauke, Fleischer, Dögle, and I might have done a little spot for TV.
But that stage, the scoping exercise was taking place, or was this before the scoping exercise?
I don't know. I was not involved in the scoping exercise, but I assume it had taken place, or it was ongoing.
But the ESIA was taking place or hadn't taken place?
Again, I'm not sure, but it
Okay.
must have been ongoing. What we learned at that point was that no, the ESIA was still ongoing. It must have been, because what we learned at that point was that the runway, the extension of the runway, had benefited from a Class 2 EIA, a desktop EIA basically, without and not a Class 1 EIA. That's what we learned, and I felt concerned that development of that magnitude had been carried out desktop.
So subsequent to that press release, what happened?
Well, I think the thread through what happened was that SIF pushed back against the development. And we are on record now, we'll make all of these available. We took the view that this development threatened Aldabra. We, of course, must make it clear that our mandate did not extend to what was happening on Assumption. We were only concerned with what was happening on Assumption in relation to what might happen on Aldabra. So we had to be very careful not to overstep our bounds. But what we did throughout the next year was to let it be known that we were opposed, and we said that in writing on numerous occasions to the scale and the magnitude of the development, and of the fact especially that SIF had not been involved. We felt that we should have been involved even at the stage of the construction of the runway or the extension of the runway, because that had a direct impact, or indirect impact, but a clear impact possible to Aldabra.
Would I be correct to say that at that stage, relations with IDC began to sour?
They did. They did. We had a heated exchange between the SIF and IDC and the developer shortly after that, where we made known, and I made known, our opposition to the project, which is something that we never changed. I'm still opposed to the project as I sit here today, but we made that known at that point, and there was a heated exchange principally between Mr. Savvy and myself, but also between IDC and SIF. ICS took a more passive position. They were there. The developer remained mute throughout, but we had an exchange between IDC.
Do you remember around what time that was?
There is a timeline. I can't remember, but I can.
No, just tell us roughly, 25 or 24. I'm just trying to establish.
Oh no, it would have been. Oh no, 24, I think.
In 24.
Oh yes.
Was that before the technical working group was set up, or was it because of those concerns that the technical working group?
Yes,
I'm just trying to place you
the
now.
technical working group came out of those concerns.
So then there was a biosecurity consultant appointed, etc., etc. But at some point, SIF decided to step out of the working group.
Yes.
Can you explain why?
Yes. We stepped in and out. We stepped out because I think we were not being heard. Our voices and our concerns were not getting as much traction as we would have liked them to have. But then we were always conscious of the fact that we couldn't ignore what was happening on Assumption for the sake of Aldabra entirely. So we engaged again. And out of that engagement came the appointment of Mr. Corson, who was our preferred candidate. So we were able to influence some of the decisions which were taken.
Okay. And the ESIA was approved?
SIA was approved.
And again, you raised concerns.
We raised great concerns. We had hoped that it would not be approved. In fact, we wrote to ask that a halt be put on the project, etc., etc. But the SIA was approved.
Okay. But then, unfortunately, there's a twist in that, because then your own government, in fact, the head of the executive, which was former President Ramkalawan, was also the patron of SIF.
Yes. Well, all presidents are ipso facto patrons under the law.
Yes, I know. Maybe you should look into that again, because they might not all have conservation at heart, because clearly he did not have, because his VP went to the assembly to talk about Assomption Hotel bringing money to the government.
Yes, but I think it might be unfair to say that he did not have conservation at heart. The President Ramkalawan that I know and knew very much had conservation at heart, and spent a lot of time talking about conservation to SIF. He made it a point. For
he
instance,
may have talked about it.
No, but I think he did things. He came to our AGMs. He made it a point of attending our AGMs whenever he could, in order to to engage directly with us. And in this particular case, he was, in a sense, as head of state, he had to wear one hat, and that was the hat of bringing in foreign direct investment. And as patron of Al Dabra, he had to wear a hat of protecting Al Dabra. And I think, despite the decision that had been made to allow this development to go ahead, and he and I disagreed firmly and constantly on the development, in his own words, we agreed to disagree, because I could not influence him is pitching it a bit high. I mean, he is the president after all, and I was much lower down the pecking order. But I got the impression from our discussions that he felt that the development was necessary in the national interest, and whether or not he approved of the size and the scale of the development, I am not sure. But I can speak, I think, for him to say that he felt that in the national interest this development was necessary, and in IDC's interest this development was necessary, because IDC was one of the major sources of income of IDC is construction and
no, I understand all of that, and Mr. Saville explained that.
No,
Mr. George, let me interrupt you, because I want to understand this. All along, SIF was opposed to the development in its magnitude.
Yes.
And then suddenly things changed. Suddenly things changed. I'm trying to understand what changed.
Well, nothing changed. We constantly remained opposed to the project.
Well, not really.
Yes, we did.
You cooperated.
Oh no.
With the project.
What happened, and this is the point I was about to make, Commissioner. At some point, when it was obvious that the development was going to go ahead anyway, despite our entreaties and despite our objections, we had to fall back on the mandate of protecting Al Dabra.
And this is the difficulty, and people have taken objection to me talking about incestuous relationships.
Yes, and I'm one of those people.
Yes, well, I am going to repeat it. There's an incestuous relationship between conservation and development and the head of the executive, all mixed up in this tangle of Assomption. It might not be for you internally, but the perception is that there is this incestuous relationship. Ideally, the persons looking after conservation should not also be part of the persons looking after development. Okay, there is some kind of a relationship, but not one which resides in the same organization. This is what I'm trying to get from you.
Yeah, no, but I don't think there was. I don't think there was any person running development and running conservation at the same time.
Well, I mean, there was pressure from Mr. Saville, who was both on IDC and on ICS, and there was pressure from the patron of SIF, who also happened to be head of the executive.
No, but I come back. Mr. Saville, and I'm not here to speak for Mr. Saville, but Mr. Saville had to run an organization. And financially, I know that he needed to have development for his organization to properly run.
Granted.
But he was also very concerned at conservation, which is why he and Mr. Skerritt, way back in 2007, set up ICS so that ICS would be the conservation arm of IDC.
I understand that, but I'm saying to you, in the context of Assomption, it didn't work.
Well, it did and it didn't. It did and it didn't. Clearly, if we look at Assumption as a binary decision, either to have development or to have conservation, of course you're right. But it's not binary. You had to be able to match the two once a decision had been taken to build a hotel.
Mr. George, it could have been binary in terms of the magnitude of the development.
I totally agree.
Exactly.
I totally agree, which is why I said, and I maintain, that the hotel is too big for the island.
And things have come to pass, and the footprint is there already, which means that there was a difficulty, and this is what I'm trying to get at you. There's a difficulty between having developers and conservationists in the same matrix when you come to developing an island like Assomption, which is so close to an island that deserves complete conservation like Aldabra. This is my point.
I don't necessarily agree, Commissioner. I think there can be a mix of development and conservation. And in fact,
I'm only talking about in terms of Assomption.
Yes, well, let's talk in terms of Assomption.
Yes.
There can be a mix of conservation and development.
I completely agree. I'm telling you that the lie to it is the fact that there was a development of that magnitude allowed to proceed, while there were conservationists that had it in their hands to control that development and didn't.
Oh, I don't know that they didn't. This is the point I'm trying to make. I think the development can be controlled. I don't like the development. I think it's too big. But that doesn't mean that it cannot be controlled. And I think this is where it's not binary. And if we adopt a binary approach, we will end up with...
Was it controlled?
All the controls that the ESIA requested. All the controls.
What controls? Was there a biodiversity assessment carried out?
No,
was there a biosecurity officer appointed?
No, but again, it's not binary. There was the decision to allow the development to proceed while the biodiversity studies were conducted was, in my view, wrong. But that decision was taken. I have heard the experts, the scientists, I'm not a scientist, say that it's not the best, but it is not the end of the world. It can happen. One of the major problems that we had with the development was that the environmental baselines had not all been set out before the development occurred. We would have asked that this, in fact we did, this was our first objection. Stop the project. We've used the word, we wrote to the minister, we said, please stop the project while these baselines are conducted. Mm-hmm. The government decided that the project would continue notwithstanding.
Okay.
I have to accept that. What we have to do as Aldabra is work within those parameters, because our mandate is to protect Aldabra and not to influence necessarily what happens on Assumption when we run out of rope.
I understand all of that. Why I'm asking these questions and why I'm trying to understand those two elements that I've outlined, the conservation and the development, is obviously the Ministry of Environment was itself concerned and issued a stop notice.
Yes,
okay,
and rightly so.
It issued a stop notice. It put down several conditions to be satisfied before the stop notice was lifted.
Yes.
These were not satisfied.
So I'm told.
There was a meeting in State House. 4 days later, it was lifted. That's why I'm saying to you, I fail to see how the two work together, conservation and development.
I don't know what the purport of that meeting at State House was. I was not there.
But who from ICS was there? Because there was somebody from ICS there.
Well, by then I'd left ICS. I left ICS in November of 2024.
You were leader of government business. The government was involved in getting that notice lifted.
Leader of government business, I am not a part of the executive. I have no policy making authority. I do the work of the executive in the National Assembly. I'm at the end of the sausage machine. I do not make policy decisions. So I was not at State House and I was not privy.
And you don't talk to the president?
I do, but
You didn't tell him, I'm not happy with this?
Of course I did. He knows it. That's what I said. We said, not necessarily about lifting the stop notice. I'm not sure that I had the conversation with him about that, but he knows my position. My position is very clear, and he and I agreed to disagree on the development on Assumption.
Okay. I explained to you why I'm uncomfortable with what you say, because you are chair of SIF. Mr. Mkalawan was the patron of SIF.
Yes.
And then there's a meeting to lift the notice despite conditions not being met. That's why I'm uncomfortable. I'm trying to understand there.
Yeah.
Who made that decision?
Well, SIF was not engaged. We were not there. We have no idea why the stop notice was lifted. Other people will inform the Commission as to why this happened.
But do you accept that there was pressure from the executive to lift the stop notice and allow the development to continue?
No, I don't, because I'm not privy to any pressure.
But the development continued.
Yes, but I don't know that continued because of pressure. It might have continued because of other factors.
If you had environmental concerns, Mr. George, and the development continued, all right, surely you personally would have been concerned, and you would have raised it with,
and I did.
With Mr. Ramkalawan.
And I did on numerous occasions, not only with Mr. Ramkalawan. I'm on record, and I will show your ladyship. I wrote a 4 or 5 page letter to the planning authority, chairman and CEO, asking them, begging them not to approve the project. I did so in my personal capacity, and I did. So I'm on record very clearly as opposing this project. But I'm also enough of a patriot to realize that if a project is approved in good faith by a government or by the authorities who are mandated with approving it, then I must do my job within the confines of that decision. And that is precisely what we did as SIF.
Did you ever query the good faith that you mentioned?
Well, good faith is always presumed, and I always presume that people do things in good faith.
Did you not wonder about the speed of the development?
Yes, I did. I thought it was going far too fast. And again, I'm record,
So
we're
why,
on record as saying this.
Why do you think it went so fast?
Well, because the developer wanted the project to be done within a particular period of time, and perhaps IDC likewise wanted to do it within a particular period of time.
Despite that, there were many concerns being raised. There were many people raising their voices. The development was going very fast. Would I be correct to assume that there were palms being greased?
Oh, I can't go there. I mean, no.
Yes, you can go there.
No, I don't want to go there because I don't know. Why should I?
So you
why
can
should
tell
I
me.
make
You
that
can tell me
assumption?
you don't know.
If you pardon the pun.
You can
No,
tell
I
me
don't
you don't know.
I don't know, and I have never come across any instance while I was acting in the capacities that I acted of any palms being greased.
Did you personally meet the developers?
I did.
And what was the conversation about?
Well, they wanted to put pressure on SIF to go along with the development. And we made it very clear that we were opposed to the development, and at every meeting that I had with the developers, I prefaced the meeting with the words, "We are not in agreement with this development."
And when was that?
Oh, several times.
No, but when was the first time?
The first time was at that meeting, with that tripartite meeting, or quadripartite meeting, because the developer was there. And thereafter, in mid 2024, up to the end of 2024, I must have had 2 or 3 meetings with the developer. Sometimes accompanied by, in fact, most times accompanied by the CEO or the deputy CEO of SIF, but once or twice alone.
So when did you learn that SIF was going to be appointed to do the site diversity assessment?
End of 2024, early 2025, when it became evident that the project was going to go ahead.
The president told you?
The president, yes, I'm sure the president.
Because the rest of the SIF were shocked when he delivered it in Sona.
No,
So
no,
it,
no,
now from what you've said...
No, we were not shocked.
Can I finish the question?
Sorry?
Can I finish the question?
Yes, please.
The rest of the persons who have come here, including Dr. Dogley just very recently,
Yes.
said they were shocked when SONA was announced because they had no indication that SIF was going to be asked to carry out the bios.
Well, I disagree with that. I disagree with that very, very clearly. The decision had been alerted. The SIF board had been alerted of the decision that was coming. It was not a shock.
All along, did not SIF explain that they had no capacity
Yes.
to carry that out?
Absolutely, we had no capacity, and not only we had no capacity, but it was the last thing that we needed at that point, because we'd taken on Fonfaidinan in 2022. We were running cat and rat eradication on Aldabra, which was a huge drain. We were setting up Aldabra House as a project. So the last thing we needed was to have Assomption on our hands. So yes, that's one of the reasons why we pushed back.
So there had been meetings with the president as patron to SIF when SIF explained that you were in no position to carry out a bio.
I don't know whether
security
there were
assessment.
meetings with between SIF
There
and the
was.
president, but if there were, then there were.
There was
Yes.
one with the president and there was one without the president being there.
Yes,
And everybody expressed well, I'm not going to use the word horror, but they weren't very positive about
Nobody
having
was.
to take on the. Yeah.
Nobody was. We never were. But here's where we found ourselves. The project is going to go ahead anyway. We have to protect Aldabra. What do? Do we just walk away and say we protest, or do we engage in the protection of Aldabra? And this was a decision that we had to take.
Who took the decision?
The board took the decision.
The board took the decision to accept to carry out the biosecurity assessment before the SONA address?
Well, no. I'm not
Exactly.
saying, no. The board did not accept, but the board was alerted. I know the board was alerted. This did not come as a surprise when the president said that. We had
Mr.
known.
George, you could be alerted. It doesn't mean you've acquiesced.
Well, no, we didn't acquiesce, but we knew that this was going to come. And it was not a question of acquiescing or not acquiescing, Commissioner. It was a question of having to do it to protect Aldabra.
Why
What
couldn't
was the
ICS
alternative?
do it? Why couldn't ICS do it? Why would SIF, whose main role was to preserve and conserve Aldabra, be in cahoots suddenly
No,
with...
I do not accept that there were cahoots. Here's the decision that we took. ICS would have been mandated to do conservation and biodiversity studies on Assomption. It would have been, because that was its agreement with IDC for all the islands. However, SIF was going to do biosecurity because ICS has no capacity to do biosecurity for Aldabra. So if SIF was going to do biosecurity on Assomption, by the very nature of the fact that it had to protect Aldabra, and if it was there with a team to do biosecurity, it made sense, and that is the decision that was taken, it made sense for it to do the biodiversity assessments and conservation as well, instead of ICS. Where the president, what the president wanted was that SIF takes over the whole of the Aldabra group, and we said, we have our hands full with Assomption, let's do Assomption. ICS can do the other islands, and we were in these negotiations between SIF and ICS when I left ICS, because of a perceived conflict, because ICS saw correctly that it was not going to be mandated to do conservation on Assomption, and therefore a source of income from was not going to be.
Who was the main person who was upset about ICS not getting the contract for the biosecurity assessment, the biodiversity assessment?
Well, I don't know, because at that point I had not attended any SIF board meeting for a few months. Because we only have 2 or 3 a year.
And Mr. Savi was still the VP at that stage.
Mr. Savi was still the vice chair. Yes, I assume because he left IDC at some point, but I can't remember the dates. But the person I spoke to was Adrian Scarrett, who was the chair of ICS, a very good friend and of mine, and we had this conversation when he suggested that the Aldabra group, that the ICS Aldabra group Foundation take over the whole group and ask SIF to to carry out the work on Assumption. I said, well, it's going to be very difficult because why doesn't SIF take over everything and ask ICS to do the other 3 islands? And at that point, we couldn't agree, so we parted company. Very amicably. This was not an awful divorce. I thought, and as he did, that matters were now at a point where a conflict of interest could no longer be managed.
ICS were not happy with SIF getting the contract to do the biodiversity assessment.
Of course they weren't, because that would have been a great source of income for it.
Yes, so they were upset about that.
Well, rightly so.
And relations soured between the 2 organizations.
Oh no, I don't think so. I don't think relations.
Well, it was
soured.
clear. It was in the press.
No, I don't think. ICS might have taken the decision of SIF to cooperate with Assumption badly, but I know for a fact that when they released, when they issued a press release, and the deputy CEO of SIF asked me, should we respond? I made a very short response, and I said, we do not, conservation organizations that are aligned to the same objectives do not fight, we cooperate. And that was the nature of our response, because that is the nature of how I see things.
Okay, well, the impression we get is that there is a rift between the 2 organizations.
No, there isn't.
For no reason, you said?
No, I said, no, there isn't a rift.
According to you, there isn't.
Well, I know there isn't, because I know the people in ICS and I know the people in SIF, although I'm now no longer on either organization.
SIF or ICS?
SIF or ICS. But they are both organizations very close to my heart, full of people who have the best interests of conservation.
I don't doubt it.
And who will work to ensure that despite this development, Aldabra is protected and Assumption is likewise protected.
I don't doubt that they work very hard for the conservation, and I don't want that impression to go out that the Commission does not respect the work that the 2 organizations have done.
I'm grateful.
And I want that to be quite clear. However, you, in your own stead, met with the developers several times, you said.
Yes.
And you mentioned when was the first time. When were the other times?
As I say, 2 or 3 times in the second half of 2024, and 2024, 2025, 2024, and then throughout 2025 a few times. Because we had a lot of work with them.
I know that.
We were preparing the budget, etc.
How many times did you meet with them in the company of Mr. Omkalawan?
Twice, maybe, or twice, I think.
In what capacity?
We were invited to dinner.
Who was invited to dinner, Mr. George?
The developer invited President Omkalawan, myself, the CEO of IDC. That's who I can.
Where was the dinner?
At Escala.
When?
Can't remember the dates, but in 2025 they would have been.
What was the purpose of the dinner?
Simply a social get-together.
Did you not find that a little bit conflicting, given your position?
Not at all. I reported to my board every time this happened.
Did you not find it personally conflicting? I'm not telling you whether you reported to the board. I'm asking you, did you not find it strange?
Not at all.
That you were opposed to the development? You were opposed to the development, yes, and yet you were meeting developers for din-dins.
No. You must understand very clearly that, one, I was opposed to the development, and I never shirked from letting everybody know my opposition, not least the developers. Every time I met them, I made it a point, in the presence of the president and everybody else, to let them know that I was opposed to the development and I did not like it. Secondly, at that point, we had, at the time of the dinners, we were already engaged in negotiating an MOU with them for us to collaborate going forward. So it made perfect sense that we should be
No,
meeting.
it doesn't make perfect sense to be having dinner. It makes perfect sense if you sat in a boardroom and talked to them. It doesn't make sense for me that you personally attended, but also the perception, Mr. George. Do you see what the perception is?
Yeah, well, my lady, I understand perception very well, but the
Commissioner.
But the commissioner,
Yeah.
but the perception has to be read in light of my public media statements that I am opposed to this development, and in the SIF's position. But at some point, this changed. When we decided, immediately following the State of the Nation message of 2025, that we had to collaborate, we got engaged with them, and they were our partners in the collaboration. So at that point, everything had changed. We were still opposed to the development, but we were partners within a development to which we were opposed because we needed to protect Aldabra.
Your predecessor who came here talked about the MOU
Yes?
negotiations being
Yes.
very difficult.
Yes, they were very difficult. They were very difficult because we were not going to accept everything that they wanted to us to accept lying down. I'm the one who took the MOU through numerous drafts because I'm a lawyer, and it went through half a dozen drafts, many drafts, back and forth.
This is what I'm trying to understand. I mean, you were doing these negotiations, and yet you were meeting them socially as well.
Yes, but the two of them are not incompatible, and I repeat this. I was meeting them within the context of discussions going forward, as I do with any number of other people. We were engaged in negotiations going forward. At no point did I make any decision with regard to the MOU because I'd met them at dinner. Every decision on the MOU was taken at board level, and the MOU was finally, we spent a day. We gave ourselves a whole day so that all the board members, scientists and otherwise, especially scientists, were there for us to go through the MOU. And it's only then that we approved the MOU. Nothing was done by Bernard Georges on his own.
And subsequently, you met with them again in the presence of Mr. Ramkalawan, the developers.
Did I?
I'm asking you.
Not.
Did you travel to Assomption with Mr. Ramkalawan?
I traveled to Assomption with Mr. Ramkalawan, yes.
On how many occasions?
Once.
And what was that for?
I was invited, but this was only recently. I was invited to go there basically to have an inspection. I don't think the developer was there.
Okay.
In fact, the developer was not there.
So you went alone with Mr. Ramkalawan how many times to Assomption?
Once.
Just the two of you?
No, not just the two of us, a whole team of people.
Uh,
I was just one of them.
Did you not go at some point with Mr. Ramkalawan to look at where the restaurants were to be sited?
On that day, we went to look, well, what we did was we went all the way to Villa 37, and then we went to see where the Japanese restaurant was going to be sited.
Yeah. So in fact, you were saying not here, but here.
Yes?
Yeah.
Well, I said something even more radical. I said, why are you having a Japanese restaurant on a desert island? It just doesn't make sense. Let alone whether it's up on the cliff or down by the beach. It makes absolutely no sense. This is the only part of the island that retains its original vegetation. It's like any other island, and it doesn't require a Japanese restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
If you want my advice, you should have a Creole restaurant here on the beach, Robinson Crusoe for your guests. That's the advice that I gave them.
So who? You gave to whom?
To whoever was there.
So the developer?
IDC people or whatever.
The developer?
I don't know that the developer was there. Was the developer
Okay.
there?
No, I'm asking you.
I can't
I'm
remember.
asking
But
you.
if the developer was there, the developer was
Okay.
there. But I'm not. I don't remember the developer being there. The developer's
So-
representatives on the islands were there.
So you and Mr. Ramkalawan were personally involved in deciding where to site the restaurants?
Oh no, not at all. Not at all.
No? You didn't say, no, it can't be here, it must be here?
Oh no, but this was a discussion. I mean, we weren't there in any official capacity to move designs
Well,
around.
if
We were there as individuals.
no,
saying,
I think you have to be mindful of the fact that you were a leader of opposition, and Mr. Ramkalawan was the executive. If I'm a developer and the president tells me put it there, I'll put it there.
No, the developer was not there, and this
But
was
you said
not,
representatives of the developer
well,
were there.
this was not. But nobody told them to do this. We just said, as two concerned Seychellois, and I'm sure other people who were there said the same thing. Not just the two of us. Why are you sticking it up there on a cliff? It made no sense, my lady. It made no sense to have a Japanese restaurant, and I made that very clear. There are certain other things also that I said. I also said when we visited the accommodation for the staff that it was too prison-like. I told them, I said, "You're building a prison here." I mean, but these were sentiments that I echoed as
it's a little bit after the fact because planning had been granted.
Well, exactly, but I wrote to planning and said don't, and I will give you the letter. At no point. No, I think the suggestion that the President Ramkalawan and I were there simply to assist them to beautify their project is totally wrong. That was not the reason we were there at all. This was just totally incidental. And en passant, as was my comment about the size of the accommodation.
It takes a full day to go to Assomption and back.
Yes.
Both the executive and the leader of the opposition have a lot of work to do.
Well, that's their problem.
Sorry, leader of government business, I meant.
Yes, well,
you're
yes,
now opposition, that's why I'm missing you.
My lady.
You have a lot of work to do. Why go to Assomption to see where a Japanese restaurant would be
We didn't go
sited?
there to see the Japanese restaurant, with all due respect. You're not being fair, I must say this, Commissioner. We didn't go there to look at the Japanese restaurant. We went there, I was invited to accompany a delegation that was going there to be briefed on the project,
Okay.
the state of the project. And we were briefed on the state of the project, as indeed you were, I'm sure, by the developers' representatives. We then were driven up to the end of the beach to see at that point, that was the construction that had been the most advanced. We then came back, and we were driven to the site of the Japanese restaurant. We then had lunch, and we came back.
When was the last time you met with the developers?
Prior to the last general elections.
Roughly when, Mr. George?
I can't say, but it would have been. Well, the last time I met with any representative of the developer was when I accompanied the deputy CEO, currently Minister Desaubins, at a meeting at Escale with developers' representatives to discuss the budget. That was the last time I met with them.
At what stage did you ask the developers for a gift?
For a gift?
Not for yourself personally, for Aldabra House.
Oh. No, never. Oh, well, there are three instances, if I may take you through them. The first instance was when we had our very first meeting, virtual meeting, in 2023, between Mr. Abid Butt, Mr. Granny Savvy, the CEO of IDC, and myself, and perhaps other people, but I remember these. It was a virtual meeting, and that's when we first learned that the project was going to come. Very vague. Very, very vague. It was a vague discussion. Mr. Savvy had initiated it. He had sent me a WhatsApp or a text message saying, can we have a chat about Aldabra? And we had this meeting. At that point, we were told this development is going to go ahead. There will be, very vague, we didn't know the size, we didn't know the but it's just that there will be a development. Can we count on your support, Aldabra? And we said yes, because in our minds, this was going to be a synergy between Aldabra and Assomption. And at that point, they probably said, we would like to assist you as well, if we can.
They volunteered, it wasn't asked.
They volunteered.
Are you sure?
Well, it's a long time ago, and we didn't make a record of the thing. But essentially what happened was, and I'm pretty certain that they volunteered, and they said, you know, we are here for you. We responded, I don't know whether it was the CEO or myself, and I'm happy to take the blame. One of us mentioned, well, we are thinking of reciting the station because it's too close to the sea and it's old. Maybe this is something that we can think about. And very vaguely they said, yes, absolutely, let's talk. So that was very, very vague initial discussion, number one. Number two, at some point during the discussions with the developers, they knew that we were building Aldabra House, and they volunteered.
They knew how?
Because we told them, or I'm sure we told them. Well, I remember once telling the developer, by the way, when we were at Escale, we will be building the Aldabra House.
At the dinner?
No, not necessarily.
So I just asked you a minute ago how many times you met the developers. Now you're telling me there's another time at Escale you met
but
them.
I said I had dinner twice, and I met them several times. I said that. I'm not walking that back. I met them several times, and I did, but in the company of other people. But I met them at dinner twice. There were several meetings, sometimes with the CEO, sometimes with the deputy CEO. Once I know I was asked to go to Escale because Mr. Butt's replacement wanted to meet me, and I went there for 10 minutes, met with him, etc. So during one of those meetings, I volunteered that we were building Aldabra House, just like that, amongst several other things that we're talking of, and not necessarily then, but at maybe on another occasion. They said, they volunteered, well, we can help you with the building of Aldabra House. And we said, thank you very much, but we're okay. We want to build Aldabra House on our own. They made that offer, and it never went any further. The third time was something that was engineered by myself. We were, together with a group of other people, aware that a very rare collection of postcards and Seychelles documents and photographs had come up for auction in the UK. And we were very keen that these should be bought for Seychelles. So this was something that I've been talking about for a long time with several like-minded people, but also with Nouveau Banque. I wanted to replicate what the Mauritius Commercial Bank has done in Mauritius, which is that it buys everything that it can lay its hands on to do with Mauritian heritage, and it has a collection which is so large that it had to build a museum to house it. And I wanted the same thing to happen here, especially with regard to the Sue Hobson collection, which is what we're talking about. So when we heard that this was coming up, and it was a day or two away, or maybe even that same afternoon, we had very little time, I called the CEO of Nouveau Banque, and I said, I'd talked to your predecessor, Mr. Saeed, about this. He had agreed to put some money up. We have this collection coming up. Would you be prepared to engage with us going forward so that we can buy these collections?
But by us, you meant whom?
That little group of people.
Which little group of people?
Who are engaged in preserving the heritage of Seychelles.
Not SIF?
No, not SIF. Nothing to do with SIF. Although one of this group of people is Mr. Adrian Skerrett, who shares my love of culture and heritage and the history of Seychelles. Anyway, I called the CEO, and he said, we're very happy to help, but from 2026 onwards. This was 2025. Because we were very, very stretched with the beach soccer tournament, and we spent all of our money that we had set aside. So 2026 onwards, we can do this. I then thought to myself, who can I get at short notice to put up a credit line so that we could bid, because we would have only to pay a little bit later on. And I initiated a call to the developers. And I said, would you like to do this? It will be your your contribution, you are buying it, and if you wish, you will then donate it to Seychelles. And they said, let me think about it. And they came back a couple of hours later, and they said, you can go ahead and bid, and we will pay.
And how much was that?
15,000 pounds, maybe. Maximum 20,000 pounds, but something tells me it was about 15,000.
You mean to tell me you couldn't find 15,000 pounds between all of you in Seychelles?
No, we couldn't.
You mean Mr. Scarrett with all his shareholdings and his involvement in Corvina, in all of those huge companies that have millions, could not put 15,000 together, Mr. George?
I think this is unfair.
Mr. George, I have given you time to explain it. Now I'm going to come straight to the point. The perception is awful. You are telling me you're objecting to the development of the island by these developers, the magnitude and everything, and then you go and beg them for 15,000 US dollars?
I didn't beg them for anything.
It sounds like it. That's the perception.
By then, Commissioner, we were engaged with them in the preparation of the MOU. Okay. The situation had changed. We were now their partners in the MOU. We were still opposed to the development.
You oppose them?
I would not have done it.
Do they feel like they're being opposed when you're asking them for handouts?
Well, do they feel they're being opposed when we're entering into an MOU with them? I may ask. You must
Mr. George, the perception is dreadful.
Well, let it be dreadful.
The perception is dreadful, and even it looks like an incentive payment. Go along with this and we'll permit you to develop. Go along with this and we'll lift the notice. That's the perception.
This was me. This was not SIF. This was not the government. This was not anybody. This was a group of like-minded people, and this was me asking these people, not for a favor.
Well, you said Mr. Scarrett as well. Mr. Scarrett is with ICS as well. That's how it looks bad, Mr. George.
Let it look bad, but the issue is we are doing what is right, and there is nothing.
I don't think it looks
right.
Well,
you might not like it, but what we're doing is there was nothing wrong with what we're doing.
How do you think the developers took that? How do you think?
But my lady, the developers were already engaged with us in preserving Assumption.
Well,
they were already there.
If I was a developer and these demands were being made on me for FIFA, for paintings, for photographs, for development of Aldabra House, I would have thought this government is pro-development if I contribute here and there, give them a few little kickbacks here and there, and they'll let everything go forward. That's what I would feel like as a developer.
Let me correct you, please. We never made a demand for Aldabra House. That must be said. You are not being fair when you said we made a demand, because I said earlier that we had not made a demand. They had offered. So,
Mr. George, I, Matilda Toomey, have lived for 63 years on this island, and I never heard of Aldabra House. So I cannot understand how Qataris would have heard of Aldabra House unless it was mentioned to them.
But of course it was. I've said I mentioned it, and I took the blame. I mentioned it.
You mentioned that you were developing Aldabra House,
yes.
And in the same context, you wanted a contribution.
No. Sorry, you are putting words in my mouth, which is, with respect, unfair. I never said that. I said I mentioned Aldabra House once, and then subsequently, I can't remember how far subsequently, they said we would like to support Aldabra House, and we said no. Secondly, I also said that I called them when we had got already engaged with them with the drafting of an MOU. We were now partners in the preservation of Aldabra, of Assumption. Why did I go to them? Because some of those photographs are photographs of Assumption way back then. And
why them, Mr. George? 15,000 quid. It's not a lot of money.
Maybe not to you, my lady, but to our group, it was.
To you, to Mr. Scarrett?
Well, to me, yes. Otherwise, I would have done it myself. But let the record show. Let the record show that
please let it show everything.
Both Mr. Scarrett and I have put our own money forward in buying a lot of artifacts to do with Seychelles over the years, including subsequently to this one.
I don't have any doubt about that. I'm trying to explain to you is your benefactors were also the developers to whom you were opposed. It doesn't add up.
I was not opposed to the developers. I was opposed to the development on Assumption. And that's very...
And in the same breath, you ask them for money?
Oh, I never asked them for money
You
in
did.
the same
You asked
breath.
them for 15,000 quid.
No, not in the same breath. This is where, with respect, Commissioner, you put words which shouldn't be put. As Commissioner, I would have expected you to be a lot more...
You can expect whatever you like. You said you want to be fair. I think it's a fair question to ask, Mr. George. It's a fair question that if you are opposed to a development in its magnitude or whatever, you don't go back to the same people to ask for a favor.
Well, no, with respect. If you are opposed to a development, you don't engage with the developers in an MOU. And you cannot ignore that. You cannot just make it appear that what we were doing was we said...
Let me finish. The MOU, all right, was on behalf of SIF, not Mr. Bernard George. That's the difference. That's the distinction.
But nothing was on behalf of Mr. Bernard George. I've just explained that this was on behalf of a group which is called the Seychelles Society, which is itself an association of like-minded individuals who are engaged for free in preserving the culture of our country. That's what we were doing. I wasn't doing this for myself. I just happened to be the person with the contact who made the call. But you talk about perception. You mustn't, with all due respect, you mustn't state, as you have done, that what we were doing is, on the one hand, we were opposing the project, and on the other hand, we were kowtowing to the developers. That never happened. We opposed the project until such time as we engaged with the project, because we felt that our mandate to preserve Aldabra required us to get engaged with the biosecurity and with conservation. At that point, the situation evolved completely. My own personal view, then and now, is opposed to the project. And I've made that very clear, and you will see from my writings that I've made that very clear. But the moment that we engaged with them, we became partners.
Okay.
Like it or not, but we became partners in the preservation of Assomption and Aldabra.
Okay. Were you in the assembly when Mr. Afif came to answer questions with regard to Assomption?
I'm sure I was.
Yeah. And how did you not feel that you had to recuse yourself from those discussions?
I probably did. I'm not sure that I engaged with him.
Okay. This is the conflicts I'm trying to understand, because we've gone through all the different aspects of how you were involved personally, in terms of ICS, in terms of SIF. And I see all of those positions as being very conflicting.
Well, you do, but I don't, with respect.
Yes, I know. That's why I'm putting it to you. I'm just telling you what I can see. And you're entitled to give me your answer. And I'm taking this on board, and it's being on record. But I'm just putting all this to you, Mr. George. It doesn't look very conventional.
It is what it is. I cannot undo what has happened. What I can say is that at no point was any conflict the result or the catalyst for any decision that should not have been made.
Okay, thank
Never.
you. Thank you.
Not from me and not from anybody else with whom I was associated.
Your answers are noted, and I have no other questions. Did you have anything that you wanted to give the Commission in terms of documents?
Yes, I have, and I will make these available.
You want to hand them in as exhibits
well,
that we
what
can
I've
mark
done
them?
is no. Can I do them subsequently and put them in a particular order?
Yes, that's fine.
I have them here. There was one other thing. There was one other thing that I think, with if you permit me, I need to raise, and this has not come up now. In your interaction with Mr. Norman Webber, you said something which I would like to correct. And at 1 hour and 2 minutes and 47 seconds, you said the President and Mr. George, as a lawyer, none of them are conservationists, and they seem to be the driving force behind the decisions which are made. And at 1 hour 03 minutes and 15 seconds, you said, not just people who are either politicians or patrons without a scientific background who are not scientists. And then you led that to two opinions that you sought from Mr. Webber, one at 103:45 and one at 104:25, asking him to volunteer an opinion. Well, basically you're saying, Why are persons like a patron, like Mr. Georges, who has a big personality in SIF, but who is also in the government, why would he be involved in decision-making where conservation is discussed and no scientists are present? I thought that was unfair. At no point did
It may be unfair, but that's the trust of a commission.
But no, but
we ask unfair questions to get answers,
but it's not
Mr.
correct.
George. But Mr. Weber was being questioned, not you.
No, I know, but my name was mentioned, that I made decisions of a conservation nature with no scientists present. I resent that. At no point did I make any decisions of any conservation nature in the absence of scientists.
Okay,
there are scientists who, no, but I'm correcting the record. There are scientists who sit on the SIF board. We have Dr. Lindsay Turnbull, who's a botanist at Oxford University. We have Professor Neil Graham, who is a marine biologist of great renown, who works with the
yes,
with the
I know
Authority.
they are trustees.
We
I
have
established who the trustees were.
We have, well, no, but I'm just saying that these were scientists. We have Mrs. Jeremy, now Minister Jeremy, who herself is a scientist, who sat on the board. So at no point were decisions made by me of a conservation nature in the absence of scientists.
Okay, fair enough. It's
Fine.
noted.
I just wanted to correct that.
Perfect. I actually gave them the chance to come and correct the record themselves.
Fine, but I don't know whether they did or not, and I'm not privy to what
Thank
they
you.
did, but I wanted to take the opportunity to do it myself.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No. I think that's all for today. And Mr. Georges will give us the documents. Thank you, Mr. Georges. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. And we look forward to the documentation that you want to produce. And that is the end of the session of the Commission for today. Thank you. We'll resume tomorrow morning at 9. We'll resume tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thank you.